Welcome to the People Performance Podcast with me, Bernice Castley.
And me, James Cooper.
Hello, James.
Hello, Bernice.
How are we?
Yeah, pretty good. Back in the pod room, and this is an interesting topic. Why do high performers leave, and what does this mean for the company? So we can start to think about the word of competency.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with competency, and we can start to think about what the skills, the knowledge, the experience that people have. So if we look specifically at what you bring to the table, if you like, from a skills and from a knowledge perspective, then that can't be sort of just brushed to the side, because we have to have, and with especially in some of the environments we work with, there's some highly skilled people, some really clever cookies in there that actually, without that knowledge, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Same thing for us at T2. If we didn't know the information, didn't have the knowledge around the content that we deliver, we'd walk into a room with board directors or whoever. They'd go, well, who are you? What do you know? So I think there's that value added from a knowledge and skills perspective. There's also that element of actually an experience. I've been doing this for a prolonged period of time. I've been able to evolve. So I've kept my skill set, and this is why CPD and that continuous development and growth for your high performers is so important, because they are the people that are going above and beyond from a performance perspective to actually push the envelope and start to be really quite curious about some of the things that are being developed within your sector, within your industry, within your service, whatever it is. They are keeping themselves at the top of their performance because of that experience. They know that they need to keep evolving. They know that they keep developing themselves.
There was an article that we both found on Harvard Business Review that said that those high performers are sometimes 400% more productive than an average employee.
Imagine that.
Crazy number when you pause and think about it. But if we were to ask our listeners to almost kind of pause and just ask yourself a couple of questions, some of the things that we would ask you to consider is, what are your kind of key performance indicators for that particular role? And can I think of specific examples when this person in my team has gone above and beyond those expectations? And what does that look like? Do they take initiative? Are they able to really effectively problem solve and face challenges effectively? And from a results perspective, are they achieving those results, again, above and beyond everyone else? How do they compare to those within their team?
I think a slightly different question, and the same principle, is what does good look like for you?
Yes.
So you being your organisation, your team, the people that are in your circle of influence, what does good look like?
Yeah.
So there will be, and we do it automatically anyway, and just to give you the concept is that even from a very young age, we will assess and know who's better than who.
Yeah, but I think one thing that's really important to anyone listening to this is, don't make an assumption that if someone's driving high levels of revenue into the organisation and the KPIs they're definitely hitting the mark against every single one of those, if from a behavioural perspective they're not living and breathing your values, they're not collaborative, they're not a team player.
No, and this is where you have this sort of balance between performance and behaviour. Because, and think about, and I know all of the guys that we work with and all of the other examples, especially when we work with individuals, it is around sort of, well, hold on, you're hitting your targets, but how are you doing that?
Yes.
By hook or by crook, we can achieve. We will get it done. We will get this over the line. Okay. To what detriment, though?
Yes.
To what detriment of sacrificing the behavioural element for somebody that doesn't necessarily have the same values, professional and personal values, that the organisation would require at this moment in time?
Yeah.
And what serves them well? Well, you actually still question going, right, okay, you've got to the end result, you've hit the target, you've performed, but hold on a minute. Your attitude stinks. You are definitely not a champion when things get challenging.
Yeah.
You're not presenting yourself positively, and then the impact of that and what it has on other people. So what does good look like from a behavioural point of view then, Bernice?
This is someone who truly lives and breathes the values and expectations within the organisation. This is someone who shows up in a really positive, proactive and productive mindset. this is someone who potentially might be a really positive influence on those people around them. This is also someone who potentially, when faced with crisis, challenge, which of course happens all the time within a fast-paced organisation, but despite those challenges, they're able to truly dig in and they show the right mindset and behaviours in those moments as well.
Would you trust these people then from a behavioural perspective?
100%.
And from a performance perspective? Why would you trust them though?
Be based on evidence, past experience, and it's not that I assume that just because you have the right behaviour and attitude, I can't just assume that I'm going to get really good outputs and results from you. But a true high performer is that person that you know you can trust and rely on them. You know that they're going to achieve the results that are expected of them, but they're also going to go about it and do that in a really positive and productive way.
So if you think about that then, they might even, from a performance and behavioural perspective, to just put a band across both, is that, well, actually these people would then be potential new leaders or future leaders. So from a succession point of view, would they be showing you the behaviour and achieving the results, as well as actually influencing the people that are around them as well?
Yeah. So do they demonstrate those potential leadership qualities?
Yeah.
I think qualities is, the right word to consider there. And do they inspire colleagues? Do they have the influence and inspire colleagues? And do they have, from a performance perspective, the right level of skills and knowledge and based on what that role requires?
Not making assumptions and bringing those facts. What are the things that people within organisations see from their high performers, and what are some of those? What do those environments look like?
Yeah, well, that's just it. I think it's about focusing on the facts and the evidence and the data. So from a performance management perspective, what does that look like within your organisation? Objectives, whatever it looks like, or whatever language you use in your organisation, does that exist? And what does that information tell me? So that's really important. From a behavioural perspective, what is it that I see? What is it that I hear? And can I think of specific examples in order to bring that to life? Again, we need to completely reduce and eliminate any potential unconscious bias here. Just because that person does have an influence from a social relationship perspective with you, but other managers and leaders, their peers and their colleagues, again, doesn't quite mean that they're a high performer just because everyone knows who they are and they have an influence over people. So what specific examples come to mind, and how do I gather the right data and evidence in order to form the right assessment on whether or not this person is a high performer? And there's various tools from a HR perspective that we can use. Some people use the 9-box grid. For some people, for us here at T2, we specifically manage our performance as T2 employees based on our performance and behaviours. And we have core kind of objectives aligned against both of those kind of core functions.
And I think even when we start to look at who these people are, I think it's good from a leadership perspective, because you can't necessarily control your competitors reaching out to your high performers and starting to think of, well, we do this for you, we do this instead, and you could get this, or whatever that situation looks like. But think about where you sit, and are you doing things actively, going out of your way within your control to be the high performer, or is there something that you might need to be reading around or increasing your knowledge or your experience around? And
also, I might be a high performer and I know that I'm consistently driving results. I'm overachieving from a performance perspective. But actually, the reason why I'm not getting that next step or opportunity and promotion, is it actually from a behavioural perspective? Am I sharing it well?
Yeah. You can get it done, but you actually rock the boat a little bit too much.
Yes.
Okay. So lots in there, Bernice, and lots of things when we're just talking about identifying high performers. What's the next thing we want to start to look at?
So I think once you've identified exactly, truly, who are those people around you that are a high performer based on their not only outputs and performance, but also from a behavioural perspective, suppose the next thing naturally for us to explore is thinking about, so if you were to lose that high performer, what impact does that have only to the organisation, but also what impact does it have to the team?
Yeah, the people around them, right?
Yeah. So if we start off with the team, so thinking around the impact that loss of a high performer has to the team, what comes to mind?
Oh, well, productivity goes down.
Yeah.
And I'm talking, it could, for the team and for the organisation, it could look at different time frames, but the initial for the team would be productivity goes down because they've lost a player, they've lost a member of the team,
Yeah.
they've lost that key influencer, and now okay then, so who's going to now step in and do their work?
Yeah.
Who's going to now put in the time? Which leaders are now? And is it you? If you're listening to this and thinking, I've just had my high performer leave, now what's my sort of process? Well, first of all, you're a little bit behind the curve anyway because you needed to be doing this whilst they were in situ, if you like.
Yeah.
Now we're in a situation where they're gone and we have a void. We need to fill that void. How much is this going to cost me from a recruitment, from a succession planning? Is there a succession plan in place? Did we know that X was going to leave and now we have Y coming in to do the same job? Are they qualified enough? Are they experienced enough? Are we able to give them that little bit of a time to join that level of the organisation, or just step into that role? Are they coming from a different team? Are they coming from a different? Have we actively been going out to find somebody else because we knew our high performer was leaving?
Yeah, and if this was someone who did have a specific set of skills or knowledge, and there wasn't a succession plan on what would happen if they would leave, or even as well, you should still have a succession plan, because what if they were to be promoted?
Yeah.
They've not even left the business, but if they would be promoted into a different role, then who fills that?
Yeah.
And if we don't have that there or a plan there, then of course naturally there's going to be a huge impact from a cost perspective, because we're now having to recruit externally. And of course everyone knows there's going to be a lot more kind of costs that we need to take into consideration there. So not only is it going to impact the organisation financially, again, it's that loss of skill, of knowledge, and it's potentially, if we don't have things set up effectively, then that's going to have a huge ripple effect to the organisation.
I think even just from a time perspective as well.
Yeah.
Is that and think about your organisation and the organisation you work in. If it is that you are backs against the wall, you're under pressure to achieve outcomes, you're pushing the productivity and the goals that are being set, you're being stretched from a productivity point of view, that person leaving, or that the impact on the recruitment and the time it takes to get them up to speed, even if it is that they're at the right level, they've got the right experience, they've got all of these things, it still will take time for people to be immersed within that team.
I think if you were to think about the majority of clients and partners that we work with, how many times do people say, oh, yeah, it's just so busy at the moment, fast-paced and energetic in every single business and every single industry. So therefore, there's never going to be the perfect time for someone to leave, let alone a high performer. Are we effectively benchmarking pay and salaries, and mean that regularly, to ensure that that's not a potential impact? But is it that maybe they've just been reached out to, or maybe they weren't looking, they had a little look and identified, actually there's a business over here that I really like the look of, maybe the finances are good, maybe it's a benefit perspective. For some people it might be just simply down to the fact that, you know what, my family life, personal circumstances have changed and I need a job that provides a little bit more flexibility.
There's that element of where you are at in your career. And again, I'm not, without making assumptions based on what we've just said, some people might wind down at different times in the career. So you might have had somebody that's coming to the end of the career, they've been a high performer for the last 30 years, and you go, you know what, I just want to take my foot off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And there's always going to be an element of, and there's certain things that it's difficult for us to control and influence from an external perspective. We can't stop our biggest competitor reaching out to our high performer and saying, hey, we like the look of you. So if we think about things from an internal perspective that happens within the organisation, that could
be part of the reason why.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's think about the feeling of this person. So I'm considering leaving, but why have I done that from an internal point of view?
Yeah.
So first of all, I felt isolated. I know that sometimes when I haven't necessarily moved too many jobs, but the jobs that I actually cared about, it's because I've been out and I've just been doing my own thing. I've not been able to work with other people.
Yeah.
It's like, go, you do your thing. I know you can do it. Brilliant. Go do it. Thanks. Or is there even a thanks? It's just, you're out of the picture. I know that you're competent with your job. Your skill set is really good. I don't really need to speak to you very much.
Yeah, and it sounds awful, right, when you first think about that. And this is something that comes up in some of the workshops that we do when we talk around situational leadership.
Yeah. On that, Bernice, I'll share this because it was a great point, and I told the person in the workshop that I was going to pinch it off them.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to mention it on a podcast, so I'm going to right now. So basically, the things that are annoying you, or the people in your teams that are annoying you as leaders, actually, we prioritise the time that we need to spend stopping the wheel from squeaking.
Yeah.
That's smooth. We just want to get the team moving smoother. But on the other hand, you've got wheels that have been turning again and again and again, churning through the work. You can throw bumps in the road. They'll still ride over them.
Yes.
And they'd never cause you the problem. But when you don't hear that,
yeah,
that's isolation can be the
Definitely.
bit that, okay, I've been doing this for a number of years, or whatever that time frame is. I've come in, I'm not making much noise, but you've not actually turned around and gone, are you okay?
Yeah, because we have high levels of trust and reliance, and it's a case of, I know whatever the task, whatever the challenge, I can give it to James, and James is going to crack on and he's going to get it done because I can rely on him. He's competent, and yeah, that high level of trust. But how does that then make you feel? And again, from a time perspective, if we're focusing on kind of the squeaks as you describe it, then again, we don't intend to, but those little kind of one-to-ones or check-ins and catch-ups that I've got with you, it might be a case of, you know what, there's a crisis happening right now. I need to cancel that, but I know James is all good.
Yeah.
But again, it's how does that then make you feel? You're now feeling isolated.
Yeah.
You're feeling as though you're not able to connect with other people. You're not able to influence. Sometimes you're not able to speak up and just talk about how you're feeling in certain situations.
And I think that lack of feedback is something that we might need to really think about, is there an environment for our high performers to actually just check in?
Yeah.
And it's not, are you okay? It's
Yeah.
just so you know, just checking in, just giving you a little heads up. You all right, Bernice? And you go, yeah, okay. Well, I'm fine. You don't need to worry about me. But can I just, this situation going on, I don't know if it's going to impact me at the moment, but it could do in the future. That little communication could then be the spark going, right, okay, let's book a bit of time in the diary. Let's just make sure we're not taking things to the extreme. Let's nip it in the bud now. Let's do this, do whatever we need to do. Because like we see on a number of occasions, let's go back to our mate Stuart. Stuart's the one that's been absolutely flying for 6 months. Sure. He's been smashing all of his targets. He's absolutely brilliant in the office. He brings a level of humour. They're absolutely brilliant people to be around.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, it changes. It changes from the situation that it was before. Well, have we just been neglecting our high performers and not necessarily nurturing them?
Yes.
So are we in a situation where we've just neglected them slightly? They've still been doing the job, but there's been that little bugbearer, that little thing that's been annoying them just slightly.
Yeah.
And now it's starting to grow legs. Now it's starting to influence them, and it's starting to have an impact on their performance, because you've been too busy looking at your squeaky wheels and the people that have been causing you big problems, and your high performers have turned around and gone, well, hold on a minute.
What about me?
What about me over here? Because now I see that they can get away with it. I'm making sure that I'm doing everything I can, going over and above.
I think those high performers, they need that acknowledgement.
But it's not a big check, is it?
Yeah, it's not a big kind of a clap and all of that jazz.
Get me up on
but
stage.
If that person really is a high performer, then tell them. Naturally, when it comes to some of the conversations that we have as managers and leaders, it's only natural that we're having conversations around how do we improve performance. But it's really important you catch people doing it right.
And I think that's the leaders are really, really good at pointing out the negatives.
Yes.
And valid points, by the way. Are there some things we're taking for granted? I think that's where we come back to that recognition point, is going, right, well, have we just kept this person alone, doing what they do for a prolonged period of time, and we've never gone, you know what, Bernice, that's what we need. Cheers. Thanks for doing that.
You're welcome.
And then when you start to think about some of the other things that we consider around sort of who people is, that some people would hate you, especially high performers that are quite analytical.
Yes.
And quite detail orientated. The worst thing you could do for that high performer.
That might be someone who actually, they've got all of this knowledge and this level of kind of detail, and that's what makes them so good. But are we utilising that? So it might even be a case of, we don't need a big song and dance, but does that person simply just feel kind of underutilised? And is that something that's then causing them to start to maybe disengage and maybe start to put them into a situation where they think, you know what, maybe I do look elsewhere. Yeah. I think there's, again, various different situations and reasons why people do go. As we said, maybe it's based on external factors and influence from a personal home life perspective. Maybe it's kind of people reaching out to them, but there's definitely going to be influences from an internal side. But again, think about you. Sounds awful, but as that person's manager, as that person's leader, again, we don't intend to do this, but is there something that's happened that's maybe resulted in this person feeling the way that they do?
Okay, so let me think about your high performer again and the reason why they'd leave. If I've been, and again, you might be listening to this and thinking, he's just said something there. They've just said something that's really, because I'm now taking for granted my high performers because I've given them all this work. They've just come out of this period of the year, this quarter, this week, this month. It's been a real tough grind. And you know what? We was all busy, but I just didn't listen.
Yeah.
The comment, I need to speak to you. Yeah. Maybe not today, but in a couple of days' time, we'll get some time in. And then you cancel that, Bernice. And I go, oh, you're not listening. You're not listening to me. This is something that's fundamentally important for us as a collective, as a team, as an organisation. I can see it coming down the line. Yeah. I've seen it happen before based on my experience, my knowledge and my skill set. I know that this isn't going to work in 3 weeks' time. But I can't get a hold of you as my stakeholder to actually go, this is what I need to say to you.
Yeah.
And I don't feel as if I can actually have this conversation with anybody else apart from you.
Yeah.
Now, imagine that. All we needed to do was listen.
Yeah.
And that could have changed the whole dynamic of, first of all, even the consideration for leaving the organisation, but even more importantly, the outputs and the productivity that we're actually trying to meet and develop and even increase that outcome, that productivity. From that communication, you could have lost not just one person who's a high performer, but the people that they have the influence and the communication with.
Definitely.
The people that listen to them.
Yeah, there's an old saying that was introduced to me quite a few years ago. I've probably even mentioned it on a podcast previously, but it goes like this. People rate experiences based on how they're made to feel, not what they're made to do.
Nice, yeah, I've heard that.
Might have been from me.
Yeah, it could have been from me.
But that's exactly it. So if that person feels isolated, feels as though they're not important, doesn't feel as though they're being invested in, doesn't feel as though you care or you've creating the space to listen to them, then it's going to start to have an impact. So if we start to think around, right, okay, so based on that, many reasons why they go, what can we do about it? How do we try and stop it?
So I think that there is an element of the challenges that we set people and the way that we do that as individuals and as organisations as well, by the way. This comes right the way across the board.
Yeah.
Because then that would then tie into organisational culture. So if you look at other organisations and go, wow, they're good.
Yeah.
They are. They're at the top. They are a high-performing organisation. It doesn't just happen. There's elements of individual teams, groups, collectives, brand, different areas of an organisation, of a brand, and then how they externalise themselves to the world, which we speak about a lot. But first of all, look inside, because this is the only part that we can control.
Yeah.
So there's no point us worrying about the stuff that happens. All we can do is provide for our high performers the best environment. So can we create environments that allow time for? There's a couple of little things in here. So first of all, these high performers, can you give them the time to be able to generate ideas? So Keep them curious, keep them thinking about what's next. Think about how we can develop things within our organisation. And I'm not talking about solving world poverty, but it might be.
Yeah, and thinking about that helps them, but makes them feel utilised. Also, as well, is it's fantastic in regards to innovation and growth as well. This is someone who they're in there, they're doing this particular role, and they're a high performer.
Yeah.
Therefore, I need to create that opportunity, as you describe it, to share ideas and to speak up.
And
Really
this is
important.
coming back to that as well, when we start to think about, are they being listened to? Well, if we create an environment where we can develop these people and they can express their concerns and they can have that conversation and they can just discuss mistakes as well. Oh, right, okay, well, what would you do? If there was a course, a qualification, or a meeting that we needed to set up that would benefit from our high performers and what they've articulated to us, well, what would you do? Because think about the number of situations where we've created an environment, and we've created an environment, we've put you on a course, you've done this, but actually this course isn't something that I actually wanted to do. This isn't my curiosity.
No.
This is just you going, you wanted development, there's your development.
Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense to me and actually what I want to do for my development.
Yeah.
So we can create as many environments as we need to. The environments that are right for this person. Now, if we never ask that question to our high performers of what are the things that you want to develop, what are the areas that you want to grow in? Well, okay, you might be facilitating an environment that isn't what they want.
Yeah.
So automatically you go, right, okay, there's a conversation. This organisation is saying they're going to develop me in this way. This organisation that I'm currently working for are not doing that. They're actually putting me on a course that I don't want to be on.
Yeah.
Well, it can come back to the, are you being listened and why people leave? So let's create an environment, first of all, that we can communicate those concerns or those areas for development, those idea generations. People can also share their feelings. Now, if you're not creating an environment where somebody is maybe, for example, a one-to-one, where you ask really quite open and honest questions and say, look, this is what I've seen. These are the targets. These are the goals that are coming down the line. What do you need from me as your leader, Bernice, to then actually facilitate this outcome and this stretch goal that we've got?
Yeah, definitely. And that person might be a high performer, but if they don't have the freedom to be able to just talk about how they're feeling, just because they're a high performer doesn't mean they're not human.
Yeah, not totally. I don't have any feelings. I actually only cry.
And also as well, they might be a high performer, but they still face challenges and problems.
Yeah.
And if you don't create I like the choice of word environment that you used there, James. If you don't create a really good, open and healthy environment for them to speak up and just talk about how they're feeling and be able to even express concerns and challenges again, because there's going to be certain elements and certain things that they see that you don't. So is it that actually they are expressing and can see a challenge and concern? It could even be about another team member or a process or a procedure or a project.
Yeah.
If they don't feel as though they can speak up about that, then that could, again, have a bit of a negative influence and impact on how they feel in certain situations.
And we're trying to prevent that, right?
Yeah, so that communication piece is really key, isn't it?
Okay, so when we start to talk about communicate, or how we communicate with them then. And remember, this is just to prevent our high performers from leaving. What would your guidance be on that?
I think make sure it happens. Again, as we said earlier, from a communication perspective, when it's fast-paced, when it's a little bit crazy out there, again, sometimes the check-ins and conversations that we have with that high performer sometimes get cancelled or gets moved around. So firstly, are we communicating? Make sure that happens, because some people think it's a little bit cheesy to say that it's really important to make sure you've always got the one-to-ones and never cancel a one-to-one. Of course, sometimes that needs to happen. But even if you have to move it, reschedule it at least. I know I can think of situations in my career where a one-to-one's been cancelled and never put back in again. How does that make that individual feel? It makes them feel as though they're not valued. So make sure that we are actually communicating to start off with.
Yeah. I think from a point of view of if we are actually stepping into those environments of communication, whether it be to one, whether it be in debrief, well, first of all, let's not make assumptions in there.
Yeah.
Because once you say something, you're now forming a relationship there, aren't you?
Definitely.
And if you're forming a relationship with a high performer, well, hold on a minute. This is going to be, they are now a stakeholder for you.
Yeah.
How do we manage that? So let's think about, if we say something, make sure it happens.
Definitely.
Don't make assumptions, because that's why you might have cancelled it and you might not have explained in the way that that person needed the explanation. And now they're going off like a crazy person trying to achieve the goals to make you as a leader recognise them.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you've got somebody going the wrong direction because of a communication you haven't had.
Yes.
A communication you haven't had.
Yeah.
So they would have never have known that, because you cancelled the one-to-one, you cancelled the team meeting, or you've had to flex and bend, and you've not actually got a hold of that person who is an influencer and has an impact on a wider audience than just you.
Yeah.
So when we start to create opportunities for growth, and then think about the challenges that we set these high performers, well, make sure it's a challenge that they actually are bought into.
Yeah, does it align to not only the organisational goals, but also as well from their perspective?
Yeah.
So if I've taken the time to have that one-to-one and I understand exactly what their goals are personally, what are their ambitions and where do they want to get to, and how do I create the opportunity to just kind of to stretch them, to give them the opportunity to face challenge and be able to grow. But again, coming down to that communication, when I do that, when they face, I don't know, a problem, let's say, or I set them this opportunity where they're kind of taking on this new project, but when they have a problem with that, what do I then do? Again, so really thinking about my impact here. Is it that they face a problem and I think, right, okay, well, you just weren't ready for that yet, were you? So let me take that back off you, or let me just step in here and I'm going to tell you this is what you need to do and this is how you need to do it, and all of that.
Micromanagement.
100%. And we, of course, I'm not a micromanager. Was never my intentions. But again, think about the impact. So this is a high performer. Yeah. They don't need telling how to do X, Y, and Z. They like a bit of challenge. They thrive on a little bit of challenge. This is someone who wants to grow and wants to learn. How do I ensure that I'm simply there to help, guide and support, and not to drive the process?
I think it's interesting when you look at people that are in environments or organisations, especially when you come to you and go, well, I've had this in a couple of coaching sessions where they've turned around and gone, oh, well, they made a mistake, so I'll just end up having to do it myself.
Right.
So my question to you is, are they a high performer? Because if you're having to jump in, first of all, do you trust them? Do you trust that they can do the job?
Yeah.
Have you done your due diligence and known what their ambitions are and actually thought about, well, okay, I'm going to give it to you, Bernice. I'm not going to give it to James, because there's a reason why. There is a reason why. And we've already had this conversation in a one-to-one. But when some people go, well, I jumped in, I gave them the task, and then they weren't doing it my way.
Yeah, or how I wanted it.
Well, of course they're not going to go away. They're a different person.
Yeah, and if you've not communicated it effectively, and I suppose we're getting into the realms that we have a topic that we speak to a lot of people about. We call it the delegation dilemma. And I think for anyone who can resonate with any of this, if you are a partner of T2s, then you'll have access to the T2 Hub.
Yep.
Definitely take a little search of the delegation dilemma. But for those people who are high performers, they don't need you to tell them once down to the nitty-gritty detail on how to execute X, Y, and Z.
They've got the skill set, they've got the experience. It's not just going to be this one-way street of communicating with them. They're actually going to have their own ideas.
Yeah. And actually, rather than disempowering them, how do I empower this person through my communication?
So then that would be talking about autonomy, setting clear expectations and the way that you're going to communicate with your high performers.
Yeah.
And then to go, right, just understand, I am here to help and support you. Don't think that I'm distant. This is the best way to communicate with me. This is the best time to communicate with me. And then there is no ambiguity.
Yeah.
And they don't think, oh, they're going to be looking over my shoulder. They're going to be micromanaging me. That doesn't happen, because you've set the guidelines and the way that things are going to work for this particular project or person that's joining your team. This is what we're really starting to look at. So this is the thing that we're going to focus on. I'm going to give this to you, and this is how I'm going to help and support you.
Yeah.
If there's anything else that we need to review, please, by all means, send me an email, get me on the phone, ring me. My office is only down the corridor. Let me know, and we can adapt and we can tweak.
Yeah, yeah.
that if we started to really think about that, are we giving them what they need to do what we're asking them to do?
Yeah.
And not necessarily changing the goalposts too much, even though life happens, Bernice, doesn't it?
Of course.
But our high performers, if they are understanding all of that transparency of communication and going, this is the reason why this has happened at this time, we are going to need to be sort of open and transparent with them so that they can see that.
Definitely.
Think about, and again, going back to a high performer that doesn't have that transparency, and it's needed for them to succeed, by the way. It's not just we're telling everybody everything.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't work either. But if it is that we're starting to look at specific details that they need to achieve their goal, and we hold that back 3 months, a week, a day, an hour down the line, they find out that you had that information and you just didn't give them it. All of a sudden, are they now a high performer? Potential for them to go either way and start to go, well, do you know what? They've had that information. They've now maybe looked bad in front of somebody else.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave the organisation. I'm off.
Yeah.
So if it is that, and again, help and support would be different for every individual.
But it's your job to recognise and identify and find out what it is that particular person needs. And something that, I suppose, a question that we ask a lot of the clients that we work with is, how do you nurture your top talent? So really think about that. You can't just trust and expect that you can just leave them to crack on because you know that they're reliable.
That's not nurturing.
That's not nurturing your top talent. So how do you continuously stretch them? How do you continuously support them? How do you continuously coach them so that they can grow and they can still develop, so that they don't end up feeling almost stuck or even a little bit stagnant?
Yeah. So I think even from that point of view, if we was to provide a summary for everybody that's listening to this now, we've broken this down into 3 things.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we, just to really give clear expectations so that we can remember it and so that we'll use the power of 3, right?
Sure.
So first of all, we need to know, what do we need to know about these high performers to either nurture them to the best of our ability or even just to understand them a little bit? So what is it?
You need to know, who are your top performers to start off with.
Yeah.
So, like, kind of, what information do you have in order for you to truly identify exactly who they are? Once you've identified who your top performers are based on data, evidence, and kind of detail, and not assumptions,
of
course, then do I know them? Do I know who they are? Do I know what they want? Do I know what their purpose is? What are their goals? What are their ambitions? What is it that how is it that they're driven? And what is it that they need? That's going to be really key and really important.
So first of all, let's get to know them.
Yes.
Then we can start to look at, have we got plans in place?
Yeah.
So what do we need to plan to make sure that our high performers are in this nurturing and getting what they need?
I think from a planning perspective, we've got, again, 2 elements. So the first plan is all around, what's the plan for them? So now that I know who they are, now that I know what they want and what they need, what plan do we have in place in order to achieve that?
Yeah.
So do I have a plan that's set on how they can gain these new opportunities for development and growth? So do I have a plan that's aligned to them? There's a second element, though, that do I have a plan for the organisation and the business, even the team? Because it might be that this high performer, we go above and beyond for them, and we've got fantastic levels of trust, psychological safety, rapport. This person has an abundance of development opportunities. They still might go. We're not saying that every single high performer is leaving because of you or because of the organisation. They could have the most amazing environment for them to truly thrive. They still might leave.
What plan do we need then?
So this is now a plan in regards to, what we mentioned earlier. Do we have a succession plan? So what does that look like? Thinking around, who are the other team members and do they have the skills, the knowledge, or maybe is it that there's a few tweaks and considerations to make from a behavioural aspect in order for them to step up into that role, if that does happen. So from a succession perspective, what does that then look like? And do I actually now need to take into consideration and think about the development for peers and colleagues around this high performer in case that does happen?
Yeah, okay. And then I think this comes down to probably the thing that we've touched on right the way through this podcast is around communication.
Sure.
So communicate with them. So how are we going to do this then? So to keep our high performers, maintain them, keep them in that nurture zone. And again, being realistic and understanding that some people will still leave based on something that's ill and
Sure.
it's not necessarily. But what does good look like from a communication point of view then?
I would say clear, consistent, regular. So again, making sure that we commit to having that effective communication with them. So how often do we communicate with them? Is it regular? But also when we do communicate with them, what does that look like? So is it open? Is it transparent? Am I there to help and support and guide? Am I coaching them? Am I asking questions? Or is it in certain situations I'm just telling them what to do and how to do it? Now, from some individuals, some particular high performers, they thrive and love a little bit of independence. So it might be that their check-ins maybe aren't as regular as other people, but when you do check in, are you providing clear direction of expectations? So for certain individuals, someone who's a little bit adaptive and likes to kind of just flex and fly and move at a fast and rapid rate and make and do awesome and amazing things, they still need that clarity on expectations, outcomes. So that communication, how often are we communicating? Is it regular? Is it enough? Or is it a bit too much in certain situations? And when we are communicating, what does that look like? Am I coaching? Am I guiding? Am I supporting? Am I creating that open and transparent environment from a psychological safety perspective? And also, am I giving them the clarity from a direction perspective? And is that what they need?
Get to know them, have the plans, and communicate in the way that works for them.
Definitely.
So I think unless there's anything that you need to consider, I think or that we want to add in, I think we've covered a lot in there. Obviously, rewind and go back to the bits that you need to just maybe take in. And again, if there is anything that you need, obviously reach out to the T2.
And also as well, if you just need a little bit of support in being able to identify who your top performers are, and also as well, how do we manage performance? We've worked with, I can just think of one client just off the very top of my head that comes straight to mind, where they actually had no process on how they manage performance. And so we went in to help and support them to consider what does that look like. But again, remember, when it comes to managing and leading performance, there's two elements. Performance from an objective output perspective and results, but also as well, behaviour is really key and really important. And never forget the influence and impact that you have on that. So James, really good podcast. So really enjoyed it. And I'm sure we will be back soon with another People Performance podcast.
Thank you, Bernice.
Thank you.